The courtroom was a tomb, and Sophia Alden was being buried alive. Pregnant and publicly humiliated, she faced her billionaire husband, Marcus, and his smug mistress, Chloe. The lawyers were ruthless, painting her as a delusional gold digger. Her life was over. But no one, least of all Sophia, was prepared for what happened during the recess. A hissed threat, an insult about her unborn child, and then the sharp, stinging crack of a hand across her face. The mistress had slapped the pregnant wife in the middle of the courthouse, but the real shockwave hit when the judge resumed, and the cold, silent CEO finally stood, raised a trembling hand, and pointed not at his wife, but at the woman he'd been sleeping with. The silence in the penthouse was no longer peaceful. It was cavernous. It was the sound of an ending, a hollowed-out space where a marriage used to be. Sophia Alden stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, her hands protectively cradling the gentle swell of her stomach. 5 months. 5 months of carrying Marcus Alden's heir, and 4 weeks of knowing her life was a meticulously constructed lie. Outside, the city lights of Boston glittered like a carpet of fallen stars, indifferent to the implosion happening 52 floors above. For 3 years, this view had been her backdrop. She was Sophia Alden, wife of Marcus Alden, the enigmatic CEO of Alden Global Dynamics, a man who moved markets with a whisper. Theirs was a story the magazines adored, the brilliant, reserved CEO and the warm, cultured art curator who had softened his steel edges. It had felt real. The quiet dinners, the shared laughter over old movies, the tender way he's touched her face when she told him she was pregnant. His eyes, usually a guarded grey, had lit with a genuine, unguarded joy. A son, he'd whispered, kissing her forehead. Or a daughter. A new legacy. The crack had appeared, as it so often does, in the digital ether. A text message on his phone, left unlocked on the marble bathroom counter. A name she didn't recognize. Chloe. The message wasn't just suggestive, it was explicit, familiar, and recent. He'll never leave her while she's carrying the heir. You know the plan, Mem. Just hold the line. Cyprian is getting nervous. Sophia's blood had run cold. It wasn't just an affair, it was a plan. And who or what was Cyprian? She hadn't confronted him. Not then. The woman who curated art was also a woman who understood research. She had waited, her heart a leaden weight in her chest, and she had watched. She saw the late nights disguised as board meetings, the business trips that didn't appear on the company's public itinerary. She used her administrative access, a privilege Marcus had insisted she have, to look at the plan. What she found was worse than infidelity. It was a systematic siphoning of funds from Alden Global's R&D department into a shell corporation she'd never heard of. And the transfers, masked as consulting fees, were all authorized by a digital signature block she recognized. Chloe Turner, Vice President of Strategic Acquisitions. The woman wasn't just a mistress. She was inside the company. And the mention of Cyprian, Alden Global's most aggressive competitor, suggested something far darker than simple embezzlement. It suggested treason. When Sophia finally presented her findings, not with tears but with a stack of printed-out spreadsheets laid on his antique mahogany desk, Marcus hadn't looked guilty. He hadn't looked apologetic. He had looked nothing. His face had become an impenetrable mask of cold obsidian. "You shouldn't have been looking into this, Sophia," he'd said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "She's stealing from you, Marcus, from us. And this Cyprian, are they blackmailing you? Is that what this is?" "What this is," he'd said, standing up, "is a breach of trust, a breach of our pre-nuptial agreement. The words had hit her harder than a slap. What? Section 4, Clause 12. Spousal non-interference in business operations. By accessing secure files unrelated to your designated role, you have violated the agreement. You have compromised the company. Compromised? I was trying to help you. She is robbing you blind. That, Marcus had said, gathering the papers, is my concern, not yours. 2 days later, she was served with divorce papers. It wasn't Tam. Marcus was filing for divorce, citing her instability and the flagrant breach of their marital contract. He was petitioning to have the prenup enforced in its entirety, which would leave her with virtually nothing. He was also demanding full custody of their unborn child, alleging her erratic behavior made her an unfit mother. The man she loved, the man whose child she carried, had vanished, replaced by a ruthless corporate executioner, which led her to this: the Suffolk County family and probate court. A sterile beige room that smelled faintly of floor wax and stale coffee. She sat beside her lawyer, David Harrison, a kind, silver-haired man who looked perpetually outgunned. Across the aisle sat Marcus, looking as if he were chairing a board meeting, not dissolving a marriage. He was flanked by a legal team of 3, led by the infamous Rebecca Vance, a woman known for leaving her opponents as little more than a grease spot on the courtroom floor. And then, just as the bailiff announced the judge, the courtroom doors opened one last time. In walked Chloe Turner. She wasn't demure. She wasn't hiding. She wore a crimson suit so sharp it could cut glass, her black hair pulled into a severe high ponytail. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on Sophia. She didn't just look. She smirked. Then, with all the confidence of a woman who knew she had already won, she took a seat directly behind Marcus. He didn't flinch. He didn't turn. He just stared straight ahead, as if she wasn't even there. Sophia's hands trembled. It wasn't just a divorce. It was an execution, and the executioners were all in the room. All rise. The Honorable Judge Maria Klein presiding. The room stood. Judge Klein, a woman in her late 60s, with a no-nonsense demeanor and intelligent, weary eyes, swept into the room and took her seat. She looked over the docket, her gaze lingering for a moment on the high-powered legal teams. "This is the matter of Alden versus Alden," Judge Klein began, her voice crisp. "A preliminary hearing on the petition for divorce and the associated custody claim. I have read the initial filings. Ms. Vance, you represent the petitioner, Mr. Alden. Mr. Harrison, you represent the respondent, Mrs. Alden, who is visibly pregnant. Let's try to maintain a level of decorum here that respects the gravity of the situation." Rebecca Vance stood, all sharp angles and calculated confidence. "Thank you, Your Honor. We intend to do just that." "Your Honor," David Harrison began, his voice earnest, "my client is the victim here. She is 5 months pregnant, and her husband has not only abandoned her for another woman, who is brazenly sitting in this courtroom today." Vance was on her feet. "Objection. Mr. Harrison is characterizing. The presence of Ms. Turner is as a material witness to the respondent's instability." Judge Klein sighed. Sustained. "Stick to the facts, Mr. Harrison. You are alleging abandonment and infidelity. Ms. Vance, you are alleging a breach of contract?" The judge's eyebrow arched, a clear sign of her skepticism. "That is correct, Your Honor," Vance said, her voice smooth as silk. "Mr. Alden's petition is not based on emotion, but on fact. The prenuptial agreement, signed by Mrs. Alden with full benefit of her own counsel, is ironclad. It specifically forbids interference in the operations of Alden Global. Mrs. Alden, in what we can only describe as a paranoid delusion, hacked into secure servers, stole proprietary data, and threatened her husband's business partners. "I did not," Sophia whispered, horrified. David Harrison put a calming hand on her arm. "Paranoid delusion," Harrison countered, standing. "Your Honor, my client discovered evidence of significant financial crimes, embezzlement, wire fraud, being committed against her husband's company. She brought this to her husband, believing he was a victim. His response was to serve her with divorce papers and lock her out of their home. Because her evidence was baseless, Vance shot back. She accused a senior executive, Ms. Turner, of masterminding a conspiracy. This accusation, baseless and hysterical, has caused significant damage to Alden Global's reputation and internal morale." "Hysterical?" Sophia said, her voice cracking. She couldn't stay silent. "She is sleeping with my husband." "Objection," Vance snapped. "The respondent is proving my point." "Mrs. Alden, you will remain silent unless you are on the stand," Judge Klein ordered, her gavel tapping lightly. "Ms. Vance, you are walking a very thin line. Infidelity is certainly a factor in this court. Are you denying a relationship exists between your client and Ms. Turner?" Marcus sat immobile, staring at the judge as if she were a hostile board member. Chloe, from the gallery, watched Sophia with an amused, predatory glint in her eye. "Your Honor," Vance said, pivoting masterfully, "Mr. Alden's personal relationships are secondary to the primary breach. Mrs. Alden's actions, regardless of her motivation, have jeopardized a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Our petition is simple. Enforce the prenup as written. Due to this breach, all claims to marital property are forfeit. Furthermore, given her demonstrated instability, her emotional volatility, and her willingness to act rashly and illegally, we contend she is an unfit guardian. We are petitioning for sole legal and physical custody of the child upon its birth." The air was sucked from Sophia's lungs. It felt as if the floor had dropped away. Sole custody. They weren't just trying to leave her broke. They were trying to take her baby. She looked at Marcus, a desperate, silent plea. "How can you do this?" He met her gaze. For 1/10 of a second, she saw something flicker in his eyes, a flash of pain, of conflict, but it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by the cold, flat mask. He turned his head and looked away, dismissing her. That dismissal broke her. The tears she had held back for weeks finally came. She bowed her head, her shoulders shaking, as she tried to muffle her sobs. From the gallery, she heard a faint sound, a tisk of feigned pity. Chloe was smiling. She leaned forward, whispering something to the lawyer beside her, and laughed, a quiet, sharp sound that lanced straight through Sophia's heart. This wasn't a hearing, it was a public execution, and the chief mourner was the victim herself. "Your Honor," David Harrison said, his voice trembling with anger. "This is a transparent and cruel attempt to weaponize a pregnancy. It is character assassination of the most vulgar order." "Those are strong words, Mr. Harrison," Judge Klein said, her eyes fixed on Marcus. "Mr. Alden, do you support this petition? Do you truly intend to declare your pregnant wife unstable and take her child?" Marcus Alden took a breath. He looked at his lawyer, then at the judge. His voice was flat, devoid of all emotion. "I support my counsel's petition, Your Honor. I will do whatever is necessary to protect my company and my child." Sophia felt the last shred of hope disintegrate. He had confirmed it. He had chosen his mistress, his company, his money, over her and their baby. The man she married was well and truly gone. The petitioner calls Miss Chloe Turner to the stand. Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. The preliminary hearing was moving faster than David Harrison had anticipated. Judge Klein clearly wanted to cut through the noise. Chloe rose from the gallery, her crimson suit a slash of aggression in the muted courtroom. She walked to the stand with the fluid confidence of a panther, took the oath with a steady, clear voice, and then turned her focus on Rebecca Vance. "Ms. Turner," Vance began, her tone projecting sympathy, "you are the Vice President of Strategic Acquisitions at Alden Global, is that correct?" "It is," Chloe said. "And you have worked with Mr. Alden for how long?" 5 years. I was headhunted from a major competitor. Marcus, Mr. Alden, and I have built the new strategic division from the ground up. So you work closely together? We do. Very closely. Our work requires a great deal of trust and alignment. The implication hung in the air, thick and toxic. Please describe your interactions with the respondent, Mrs. Alden. Chloe's expression shifted to one of practiced concern. My interactions were limited. I respected her position as Mr. Alden's wife. But over the last 6 months, her behavior became alarming. Alarming in what way? She began calling the office constantly, dozens of times a day. If Marcus was in a meeting, she would accuse the assistants of lying, of hiding him from her. Then, about 2 months ago, she appeared at the office unannounced. She was frantic. "Frantic?" Vance prompted. She bypassed security and came straight to the executive floor. She was screaming, accusing Marcus of having an affair. Chloe paused, as if gathering the strength to recount a painful memory. She came into my office, pointed her finger in my face, and called me a whore. She said she would destroy me. She had to be physically removed by security. Marcus was mortified. "Objection!" David Harrison was on his feet. "This is a gross mischaracterization. Mrs. Alden was never removed by security." "Your Honor," Vance cut in, "we have the security report. We are prepared to enter it into evidence." She slid a file across the desk. Sophia stared, aghast. "That's a lie. I went to the office, yes, but I was calm. I asked to see him. Chloe, you told me he was in a meeting. You smirked at me. I never yelled. I left on my own." "Mrs. Alden, I will not warn you again," Judge Klein said, her voice sharp. "Mr. Harrison, control your client. Miss Vance, continue." Chloe looked at Sophia with false pity. "I understand. She's not well. The pregnancy, perhaps. But her accusations escalated. She sent me threatening emails. And then she hacked the company." "Hacked?" "She used Mr. Alden's credentials to access the company's private financials. She downloaded sensitive data related to our acquisitions. It was a massive security breach. We later discovered this data had been compromised. An anonymous tip to our chief competitor, Cyperion Tech, nearly scuttled a billion-dollar deal." Sophia's head snapped up. This was a new lie, a monstrous, complex lie. I never sent anything to Cyperion. You were the one who mentioned Cyperion." "Ms. Turner," Vance continued, ignoring Sophia, "are you saying Mrs. Alden committed corporate espionage?" "I'm saying," Chloe said, her voice dripping with faux regret, "that she downloaded the data, and the data was leaked. During this time, she was acting erratically, accusing her husband of fraud and threatening me. You can draw your own conclusions. I was frightened. For myself and for Marcus." "And are you personally involved with Mr. Alden?" Vance asked, the question perfectly rehearsed. Chloe looked down, as if ashamed. "Marcus and we confided in each other. His marriage was difficult. Sophia was volatile, suspicious. Yes. We grew close. I supported him when he felt his life was falling apart. I never intended to hurt anyone. It was a perfect performance. She had painted herself as the supportive partner, and Sophia as the hysterical, vindictive, and criminal wife. She had taken Sophia's discovery, the link between Chloe and Cyprian, and twisted it, framing Sophia as the traitor. Now it was David Harrison's turn. He stood, shuffling his papers. He looked like a man trying to fight a tank with a fly swatter. "Miss Turner, you claim Mrs. Alden was hysterical, but isn't it true that you were, in fact, having an affair with her husband?" As I said, we grew close during a difficult time. Just answer the question, Miss Turner. Yes or no? Were you sleeping with Mr. Alden? Chloe glanced at Marcus. He remained perfectly still. Yes. The admission, so stark and shameless, sent a wave of nausea through Sophia. And this close relationship, Harrison pressed on, did it involve finances? Did Mr. Alden, for example, authorize large consulting fees to a shell corporation named Viridian Holdings? For the first time, a flicker of something, not fear, but annoyance, crossed Chloe's face. I am not at liberty to discuss specific company financials. That's proprietary. How convenient. Your Honor, we have bank records showing Ms. Turner is the sole signatory on Viridian Holdings, a company that has received over $9 million from Alden Global in the last quarter. Objection, Vance shouted. This is precisely the data Mrs. Alden stole. It is inadmissible. It is the fruit of a poisoned tree. She cannot use her crime to support her case. Your Honor, Harrison pleaded, this isn't a criminal case, it's a divorce. This data proves motive. Ms. Turner wasn't a supportive colleague. She was embezzling funds and is now attempting to frame Mrs. Alden to cover her tracks. Judge Klein looked from Vance to Harrison, her expression troubled. This is a very serious allegation, Mr. Harrison, and Miss Vance is correct about the data's origin. This is complicated. It's not complicated, Sophia cried out, unable to stop herself. She's a thief! She's lying! Marcus, tell them she's lying! Marcus slowly turned his head. His grey eyes were dead. Your Honor, my wife is clearly distressed. Her accusations are the reason we are here. They are baseless. Baseless. The word echoed in the sudden silence. He hadn't just failed to defend her. He had actively, coolly damned her. He had called her a liar in open court to protect the woman who was destroying them. Chloe Turner settled back in her chair, the barest hint of a triumphant smile on her lips. She had won. Judge Klein pinched the bridge of her nose. This court will take a 30-minute recess. I need to review this claim of inadmissible evidence. And I suggest, Mr. Harrison, you have a long talk with your client about courtroom etiquette. We are adjourned for now. The gavel cracked, and the room began to empty. Sophia sat frozen, the world tilting around her. It was over. She had lost her husband, her home, and now she was going to lose her child. Sophia felt like she was moving underwater. David Harrison was talking to her, his voice a concerned buzz in her ear. We can fight this, Sophia. We need to regroup. Don't let her get to you. But the words wouldn't land. The only thing she could feel was the icy finality of Marcus's gaze. Baseless. I need some air. The restroom, she managed to mumble, pushing her chair back. Her legs felt like lead. I'll come with you, David said, moving to stand. No. Please, I need a minute. Alone. She walked on unsteady feet, one hand on her stomach, the other braced against the wall. She was aware of the stares from the departing lawyers and clerks. She was the mad woman, the hysterical wife, the liar. She pushed open the heavy door to the ladies' room and braced herself against the cool marble of the sink. She looked at her reflection. Her face was pale and puffy, her eyes red-rimmed. The simple, elegant maternity dress she'd chosen now felt like a costume for a tragic play. She splashed cold water on her face, breathing deep, trying to find a foothold in the swirling vortex of panic. Think, Sophia. Think. He's lying to protect her. Why? The door to the restroom swung open with a soft whoosh. Sophia looked up in the mirror. Chloe Turner stood there, her crimson suit a predatory splash of colour in the beige room. She wasn't smiling. Her expression was one of cold, unadulterated triumph. "You really should learn when to give up," Chloe said, her voice a low purr. She walked further into the room, the click-clack of her heels echoing off the tile. "Get away from me," Sophia said, her voice trembling. "You look pathetic," Chloe continued, leaning a hip against the adjacent counter. She pulled out a sleek, black lipstick tube and began to casually reapply it, watching Sophia in the mirror, all pale and puffy. "Pregnancy really doesn't suit you. But then, I suppose, failure doesn't suit anyone." "He knows what you're doing," Sophia said, finding a small ember of defiance. "I don't know why he's protecting you, but he knows." "You're a thief," Chloe laughed, snapping the lipstick shut. "Oh, sweetheart, you still don't get it, do you? He's not protecting me. He's chosen me. You were just the incubator, a placeholder. And now you're not even useful for that." The cruelty was so profound, so casual, it stole Sophia's breath. He loved me. He loved the idea of you, the quiet, respectable little art mouse. But a man like Marcus doesn't want a mouse. He wants a partner, someone as smart, as ruthless as he is. He wants me. The 9 million? That wasn't stealing, darling. That was my signing bonus for a new venture. Our new venture. He's liquidating his assets from Alden Global. We're starting fresh. And you, and that, she flicked her eyes to Sophia's stomach, are just loose ends. "You're lying," Sophia whispered, but the words lacked conviction. It made a terrible, sickening kind of sense. "Am I?" Chloe stepped closer, invading her space. The scent of her perfume, something expensive and sharp, like sandalwood and citrus, was suffocating. "He's already filed for sole custody. Once you're declared unstable, the court will hand the baby right over. Marcus gets his heir, and I get Marcus. We'll hire a good nanny. You can go back to whatever it is you did. Dusting paintings?" This was it. The final, brutal reality. Sophia felt a surge of adrenaline, a primal protective instinct she didn't know she possessed. "You will not touch my child." Her voice was low, and for the first time it didn't tremble. Chloe's eyes narrowed. The amusement was gone, replaced by pure venom. "That's not your child. It's an Alden. It's a legacy. It's an asset. And you're nothing. You're just the broken container it came in. Get out. Or what? You'll cry on me. You'll file another baseless report. You have nothing. You are nothing." Chloe leaned in, her voice dropping to a vicious whisper. "He doesn't want you. He doesn't even respect you. He told me last night he can't even stand to look at you anymore." That was the breaking point. The lie was too intimate, too cruel. Sophia didn't think. She reacted. She shoved Chloe hard against the counter. "Leave me alone!" Chloe stumbled, her eyes wide with shock, before they narrowed into slits of pure fury. "You stupid bitch!" Before Sophia could even react, Chloe's hand swung around. The sound was like a gunshot in the small room, a sharp, stinging crack that echoed off the tile. Sophia's head snapped to the side, her cheek instantly erupting in white-hot pain. The force of it made her stumble backward, her hand flying to her face, the other protectively clutching her stomach as she gasped in shock. The door to the restroom burst open. A female bailiff, having heard the shout, stood in the doorway, her eyes wide. What is going on in here?" Chloe, realizing she'd been caught, instantly rearranged her features into a mask of fear. "She attacked me! That crazy woman, she attacked me!" Sophia, stunned and crying from the pain, couldn't even form words. She just shook her head, holding her stinging cheek. "I saw her!" Chloe was shouting now, loud enough for the hallway to hear. "She's insane! She tried to push me. She threatened my life." People were gathering in the hallway. David Harrison pushed through, his face ashen, as he saw Sophia's bright red cheek. "Sophia, my God!" And then, standing just beyond the crowd, his face like thunder, was Marcus. He had seen it. Or at least, he had seen the immediate aftermath. He saw Sophia's tears, the crimson mark on her face, and the hysterical, accusatory posture of his mistress. "Everyone back in the courtroom, now!" the bailiff commanded, grabbing Chloe's arm. "Judge Klein will hear about this." Chloe ripped her arm away. "Good, I want her to hear. I want her to see how violent this woman is." She stormed back into the courtroom, the picture of a wronged victim. Sophia, sobbing and humiliated, was guided back to her seat by David. Marcus followed them all, his face an unreadable, terrifying storm. The courtroom was electric with scandal. Everyone had heard the commotion, seen Sophia's red-streaked face. Judge Klein was back on the bench, her expression one of profound fury. "I have been informed," Judge Klein began, her voice low and dangerous, "of a physical altercation in the hallway. Bailiff, report." The bailiff stepped forward. "I heard a shout, Your Honor. I entered the ladies' room to find Ms. Turner and Mrs. Alden. Mrs. Alden was crying. Ms. Turner then shouted that she had been attacked." "That is exactly what happened," Chloe said, standing up from her seat in the gallery. "She's unhinged. She attacked me. She's a threat to everyone here." "Ms. Turner, you are out of order. Sit down." Judge Klein banged her gavel. "Ms. Vance, is this your witness?" Rebecca Vance looked like she had swallowed a lemon. This was not part of her plan. A witness assaulting the respondent, especially a pregnant one, was a catastrophic failure. "Your Honor, my witness is, of course, distraught." "I'm not asking if she's distraught. I'm asking if she assaulted Mrs. Alden. Mr. Harrison." David Harrison stood, his voice shaking with rage. "Your Honor, my client was followed, taunted, and then viciously slapped in the face by Ms. Turner. Look at her cheek. This is the instability they have been alleging. The only unstable, violent person in this room is the petitioner's mistress." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Chloe was on her feet again. "She's lying. She pushed me. I defended myself. She's jealous and crazy, and she should be locked up." "That is enough!" Judge Klein roared, silencing the room. "Ms. Turner, I am holding you in contempt of court. Your testimony is stricken. Bailiff, take her." "She's lying, Your Honor." The voice was not Chloe's. It was not David's. It was Marcus's. Every head in the courtroom swiveled. Sophia's heart stopped. Marcus Alden was standing. Rebecca Vance, his own lawyer, looked at him in pure horror. "Mr. Alden, sit down," she hissed, tugging at his suit jacket. He didn't even look at her. He was staring at Sophia, at the bright red handprint on her face. The mask was gone. His face was not cold. It was white-hot with a terrifying, controlled rage she had never seen before. "Mr. Alden, you will be seated," Judge Klein warned. "She is lying," he repeated, his voice, though quiet, filling the entire room. "About everything." A collective gasp. Rebecca Vance sank into her chair, her face draining of all color. Chloe's triumphant expression faltered, replaced by a sudden, sickening confusion. "Marcus, what are you doing?" "Tell them what she did." Marcus turned his head, his grey eyes locking onto his mistress. the woman he had supposedly chosen, the woman he had protected. And then he did it. He raised his right arm, his hand trembling slightly, and he pointed. His finger was steady, aimed directly at Chloe Turner. "Your Honor," he said, his voice ringing with absolute, cold authority. "She is lying. She wasn't defending herself. She assaulted my wife, and her entire testimony, from the moment she took the stand, was a calculated perjury, orchestrated to cover up her own crimes." "Marcus, no!" Chloe shrieked, a sound of pure panic. "You're confused. It's the plan." "The plan," Marcus said, his eyes still locked on her, "was to expose a traitor. I just didn't expect her to be so sloppy." "Objection!" Rebecca Vance leapt to her feet, her voice desperate. "Your Honor, my client he is clearly under duress. I request an immediate recess to confer." "You're fired, Rebecca," Marcus said, not even glancing at her. The courtroom exploded. This was no longer a hearing. It was a detonation. "Mr. Alden, you cannot just fire your lawyer in the middle of a proceeding," Judge Klein said, though she looked utterly fascinated. "I just did," Marcus stated. "Your Honor, I wish to retract my petition for divorce. I wish to retract my petition for custody, and I wish to provide new testimony under oath that will directly contradict everything my former legal counsel and Ms. Turner have presented." Sophia stared, her hand still pressed to her stinging cheek, her mind unable to process the seismic shift. The man who had damned her 2 hours ago was now defending her. Chloe Turner's face was a mask of disbelief and terror. "He's lying! He's trying to set me up! We were in this together! Tell them, Marcus! Tell them the truth!" "That's exactly what I intend to do," Marcus said, finally turning his gaze to Judge Klein. "Your Honor, Ms. Turner did not grow close to me. She was a plant. She is an agent of corporate espionage, working for my chief competitor, Cyprian Tech. The $9 million Mr. Harrison found was not a signing bonus. It was a fraction of the money she has been embezzling from my company for the last 18 months, funneling it offshore." "Bailiff," Judge Klein said, her eyes wide, "secure the doors. No one leaves this courtroom. Mr. Alden, proceed." Marcus Alden walked past the bar and stood in the center of the room, as if he were addressing his own board. He was no longer a petitioner. He was a man taking back control. "Your Honor, for the last 6 months, I have been aware of a significant data leak within my company. Highly sensitive R&D projections and financial strategies were being fed directly to our competitor, Cyprian Tech. The breach was sophisticated. It came from the highest level. It came from Miss Turner." Chloe was ashen. "He's lying. He has no proof. He's trying to make me the scapegoat." "My wife," Marcus continued, his voice resonating with a deep, pained regret as he looked at Sophia, "discovered the financial discrepancies. She found the shell corporation, Viridian Holdings. She did what I failed to do. She trusted her husband. She brought the evidence to me, believing I was a victim." He paused, and for the first time, his voice faltered. "But I was already building my own case. I knew Ms. Turner was the mole. I also knew she had surveillance on me, on my home, on my wife. I knew she was dangerous. When Sophia confronted me, I had 2 choices. I could tell her the truth, implicating her in a federal investigation and placing her in physical danger. Or I could make her a pariah. I could make her untouchable." Sophia's head was spinning. "Make her a pariah?" "I chose the latter," Marcus said, his voice raw. "I had to sever her from the company, publicly and legally, to ensure that when this all came crashing down, she would be nowhere near the wreckage. I filed for divorce. I invoked the prenup. I accused her of instability. He closed his eyes, the shame evident on his face. I had to make Chloe believe I was on her side, that I was choosing her. I had to make everyone believe it. It was the only way to keep her from bolting, and the only way to keep my wife safe. So you terrorized her? Judge Klein asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. Yes, Your Honor, Marcus admitted. I fed Ms. Turner false information, claiming Sophia was the leak. I manufactured the evidence that Ms. Vance presented, claiming my wife had sent the data to Cyperion. It was all a trap. I was waiting for Ms. Turner to make one final transfer. The FBI has been monitoring her offshore accounts for 2 months, waiting for the last piece of the puzzle. The FBI, Rebecca Vance whispered, looking as if she were going to faint. Her career was over. But then, Marcus's voice dropped, and he looked at Sophia, his eyes finding the red mark on her cheek. Then she put her hands on my wife. She touched my wife, and the plan no longer mattered. Nothing mattered except that. He turned to his briefcase, which sat by his empty chair. He clicked it open. I was going to present this to the federal prosecutor tomorrow morning, but it seems the court is already in session. He pulled out a thick file and a digital recorder. This file contains the complete, unencrypted transaction history of Viridian Holdings, linked directly to an IP address at Cyperion Tech headquarters. And this, he held up the recorder, is a recording from my office, 2 days ago. Ms. Turner boasting about how she fooled the old man and how she was going to bleed him dry and leave his pathetic, pregnant wife in the gutter. Chloe Turner let out a sound, a strangled, animalistic noise. She made a desperate lunge for the aisle. You bastard! You set me up! Bailiff! Judge Klein shouted. The bailiff grabbed Chloe as she tried to claw her way toward Marcus. She was screaming, incoherent, a torrent of curses and threats. Ms. Turner is detained, Judge Klein ordered, her voice shaking. She will be held for perjury, and this evidence will be turned over to the U.S. Attorney's office immediately. Ms. Vance, I suggest you find a very good lawyer of your own. The courtroom was in chaos. Clerks were running. Chloe was being forcibly restrained, her crimson suit now twisted, her face a mask of primal fury. In the middle of the storm, Marcus Alden walked back to the defendant's table. He stopped in front of Sophia, who was staring at him, tears streaming down her face, no longer of sadness, but of profound, earth-shattering shock. His hands were trembling. The CEO mask was gone. He was just a man, terrified, broken, and desperate. Sophia, he whispered, his voice cracking. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I was trying to protect you. I was trying to protect you and the baby. Sophia looked at the man who had torn her world apart in order to save it. She looked at the woman he had just destroyed. She looked at her own trembling hands, resting on the child he had called an asset to one woman, and my child to another. She didn't have words. She just stared at him, the man who was her husband, and a complete, terrifying stranger. The courtroom emptied, as if a dam had broken. The bailiffs removed a screaming Chloe Turner. Rebecca Vance, pale and silent, was escorted by a clerk to a side room, her legal career evaporating before her eyes. Judge Klein, after declaring the divorce petition dismissed with extreme prejudice and ordering an investigation into Ms. Vance's conduct, had retreated to her chambers, leaving a trail of stunned silence. Soon only 2 people remained, flanked by the disapproving ghost of David Harrison. Marcus stood before Sophia, his expensive suit rumpled, his tie askew. The image of the infallible CEO was shattered, leaving behind a man who looked exhausted to his very bones. "David," Marcus said, his voice rough. Could you give us a moment? Please." David Harrison looked at Sophia, his expression asking for permission. Sophia, still numb, gave a jerky, almost imperceptible nod. He squeezed her shoulder, shot Marcus a look of profound warning, and quietly exited the courtroom, closing the heavy doors behind him. The silence that returned was different. It was no longer cold. It was thick, heavy, and filled with a million unspoken words. "Sophia," Marcus began, taking a half-step toward her. He flinched when she instinctively recoiled. "Don't," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse. Her cheek still throbbed. "Just don't." I know, he said, running a hand through his hair. "Nothing I can say. There's no excuse. There is only an explanation." "An explanation," she repeated, the word tasting like ash. "You let me believe. You let them. You called me unstable. You tried to take my baby." The last word was a broken sob. "To protect the baby," he said, his voice rising in desperation. "Don't you see? If I had left you with anything, if I had shown you any kindness, she would have seen you as a threat. Chloe wasn't just stealing money, Sophia. She's connected to people. Cyprian is ruthless. They don't just win, they destroy. I saw what they did to a competitor in Japan. Ruined his life, his family. I was terrified she would see you and the baby as leverage. I had to make you seem worthless to her, a non-entity, a broken container." Sophia's head snapped up, her eyes flashing with fresh pain. You heard her say that?" Marcus's face contorted. "It was on the surveillance, in the restroom. I heard everything. The slap." He looked physically ill. "I was in the observation room with the FBI team. I was supposed to wait. I wasn't supposed to intervene. But when I heard that sound, I ran." He had heard it all. The taunts, the insults. He had listened to her being humiliated, and he had done nothing until the very last second. "You let me suffer," she said, the realization landing with brutal clarity. "You sat there and watched me break." "I sat there and died," he countered, his voice thick with an agony that matched her own. "Do you have any idea what it took? To sit in that chair, to let Vance call you those names, to look you in the eye and call your discovery baseless, when I knew you were the only one who had been brave enough to find the truth? I was protecting our family, Sophia, in the only twisted, horrible way I knew how." He sank into the chair opposite her, not as a CEO, but as a defeated man. "You found the rot in my company in 2 weeks, Sophia. It took me 6 months. You're smarter than I am. You're better than I am. And I used that. I used your love, and I twisted it into a weapon." Sophia looked at him. The tears were streaming down her face again, but the shock was receding, leaving a cold, clear-eyed sorrow. "You broke my trust, Marcus. You didn't just break it. You pulverized it. You set it on fire and scattered the ashes." "I know," he whispered, "and I will spend the rest of my life, if you let me, trying to put it back together." She stood up slowly, her body aching. "I'm going home. To my mother's. Not the penthouse." He nodded immediately. "Of course. I'll arrange everything. A car. Security." "No security," she said firmly. "The threat is gone, right? Chloe's gone." "Yes, she's gone." "Then I don't want to be protected anymore. I need to go. I need to breathe." She began to walk toward the door. "Sophia." She stopped, her back to him. "The baby," he said, his voice small. Is he Is the baby okay? After the fall? She hadn't even realized she'd stumbled. She placed her hand on her stomach, feeling the faint, reassuring flutter from within. We're okay. We're strong. He's a boy, Marcus said, almost to himself. I always knew. Sophia turned, her hand on the doorknob. You destroyed our marriage to save your company, Marcus. No, he said, meeting her gaze, his eyes full of a truth she finally recognized. I destroyed my company to save our marriage. Alden Global is finished. The investigation will tear it apart. I liquidated my personal assets. The new venture I told Chloe about, it's all in a trust. For you, and for him. It was always for you. He had sacrificed his entire legacy, the company he'd built from nothing. He had been willing to let the world think he was the villain, as long as she was safe. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was a start. I'll call you, she said, her voice soft, when I'm ready. But Marcus, don't ever lie to me again. I am not a mouse. I am not a broken container. I am your wife. Yes, he said, standing. Yes, you are. She opened the door and walked out, leaving him alone in the ruins of his life to see if, from the wreckage, he could build a new one. 3 weeks passed. The roar of the courtroom scandal faded to the incessant, dull hum of media coverage. Sophia was in her childhood bedroom, a place of soft yellows and old memories, at her mother's quiet suburban home. The penthouse, with its sterile glass walls and ghost-like furniture, felt like a different life, one belonging to a different woman. She'd followed the news with a detached, clinical interest. Alden Global Files for Chapter 11. Former VP Chloe Turner indicted on federal charges of espionage and wire fraud. Cyprian tech stocks plummet amidst executive scandal. Marcus had been telling the truth. His entire empire, the work of his whole life, was being dismantled, auctioned off piece by piece to satisfy the fallout of the investigation he himself had engineered. Sophia's hand rested on the steady swell of her stomach. The baby kicked, a strong, definitive thump that seemed to anchor her to the present. She was in therapy, learning to unpack the trauma of the last few months. It was a dizzying, painful process. She had to reconcile the image of the man who had sat cold-faced while she was called unstable, with the man who had, in the same breath, orchestrated the complete financial security of her and her child at the cost of his own legacy. He's a complicated man, Sophia, her mother, Helen, had said, placing a cup of chamomile tea on her nightstand. He did a monstrous thing, for what he believed was a righteous reason. It doesn't make it right, but it makes it different from simple cruelty. Sophia wasn't sure. The slap still echoed in her memory, the humiliation still burned, but the terror of being penniless, of losing her child, had been replaced by a strange, heavy freedom. She was, perhaps for the first time, in complete control of her own life. A certified letter arrived, not from Marcus, but from a law firm she didn't recognize. Her mother brought it to her in the garden, where Sophia was trying to read. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside there was no long, pleading letter. There was a simple set of keys and a deed. It was for a small, brick-fronted building in the Arts District, a place she had pointed out to Marcus over a year ago, idly musing, that would make the perfect gallery, a real one for new artists. Tucked inside the deed was a single, thick card. The handwriting was his, sharp, controlled, yet recognizably strained. Sophia, I know this isn't forgiveness. I don't have the right to ask for it. This is just a foundation. The building is yours, free and clear, funded by the trust. You don't have to ever use it. You can sell it. You can ignore it. I just wanted you to have a place to build something, in case you ever wanted to. I am respecting your silence. I will not call. I will not come near. I am here if you ever decide you want me to be. M. She held the card, her thumb brushing over the ink. He had heard her. When she'd said she was not a container, not a mouse, he had heard her. He wasn't giving her jewelry. He wasn't giving her money. He was giving her a career, an identity, a future that was entirely her own. She sat in the garden for a long time, the keys cold in her palm. The baby kicked again, a persistent reminder. She could stay here, safe and silent, and raise her child alone. She had every right, or... She picked up her phone. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a painful, difficult rhythm. She scrolled past Marcus and landed on David Harrison. "David," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "It's Sophia Alden." "Sophia, are you all right? I've been trying to respect your privacy." "I am." "David, I need you to set up a meeting." A pause on the other end. "A meeting with whom?" "With my husband," she said, the word feeling heavy and strange on her tongue. Not about reconciliation, not about us, about co-parenting, about the trust, about the future. It was not forgiveness. It was not a reunion. It was an armistice. It was her, taking the foundation he had offered and deciding, on her own terms, what the very first brick would look like. She was done being a victim, and she was done being in hiding. It was time to build. And that was the moment the truth finally came to light, not with a whisper, but with a thunderclap that brought a corrupt executive and a billion-dollar company to their knees. Sophia and Marcus's story was far from over. Rebuilding trust is harder than building an empire, but they had one thing that Chloe never understood: a foundation. It was cracked, it was damaged, but it was real. Thank you for joining us for this dramatic, real-life story. If you are on the edge of your seat, waiting for that twist, please show your support and help our channel grow. Hit that like button so we know you enjoyed it, and share this video with a friend who loves a story of justice and unexpected revenge. Most importantly, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. We have new stories just like this one coming every week, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.